Hello everyone and welcome back to the Find Your Peak Fitness podcast where fitness meets real life. I'm your host and coach Megan Wierenski, and today we're going to cover a very popular topic, which is what do you do once you've reached your fitness or weight loss goals? So your post-diet phase plan, what does that look like? Now this is where most people mess up. They really struggle with it, trying to transition from a weight loss phase or a fat loss phase into normal life and maintaining their progress. Most people think that dieting down or losing that body fat is the hard part, and that's actually the easy part. The hardest part is keeping it off. You hear about it a lot, people reaching their goals and they regain the weight and possibly even more. You've spent weeks, maybe even months tracking, training, seeing great progress, but what happens when you stop dieting? Do you just go back to the way you were eating before? Do you just continue to diet your way through life? This is where people can really mess up. So if you've ever rebounded after a diet, this episode is going to help you change how you approach your results and also how to transition out of a fat loss phase. Many people don't plan for this, hence they regain the weight and, like I said, sometimes even more. So I'm going to tell you the right way to go about things and how you can get your body back to operating optimally, get your metabolism working again, get those hormones regulated and not totally rebound after you've seen amazing results. So first off, I want to talk about what is the post-diet phase. So this is also known as reverse dieting or a maintenance phase. So this is where you bring your body back to the equilibrium, get back to homeostasis. So it's getting your metabolism stabilized, your hormones regulated, and even your mindset. You've heard me mention before about diet fatigue. And when we go into a diet, it puts stress on our body, but also stress on our minds. Trying to fight through hunger, pushing through workouts where you're suppressed or calorie deprived, it puts a big emphasis on your mind. So diet fatigue is absolutely a thing. So it's bouncing back after that, how to regulate all those different things, so physically and mentally. And anytime we make changes to our nutrition or even our training, our bodies are very smart. And if we continue to go, so say if we're in a calorie deficit for a long time, our bodies adapt to that dieting. So your metabolism slows down, your hunger hormones are kind of out of whack. Like I said, you get that fatigue, but your body learns to survive off those calories or those stressors. So how to bring them back up to a level where you're operating at more homeostasis, it requires a scientific approach. It requires, thought behind it and a certain protocol and guidelines to follow so you don't totally rebound. Just like if you were dieting. There's a plan in place, there's protocols you have to follow, there's adjustments. It's the same thing coming out of a diet. And it's even more important. This post-diet phase is even more important than the dieting phase itself. So just to recap, the post-diet phase plan or reverse dieting or maintenance phase is just bringing your body back to a homeostasis level. So why do most people rebound? So a lot of people have unrealistic expectations and they try to stay in their diet mode forever. I've certainly been there. I remember when I was at my leanest, and that was actually during COVID. And I remember thinking there was all this chat going around saying that people were going to put on a ton of weight because we were in lockdown and people weren't going to be moving as much and kind of just comfort eating, emotional eating. And I remember thinking, that is not going to be me. If anything, I'm going to ramp things up and do even more workouts and control my food intake and lose fat, even though I was already totally underweight. And this is a very unrealistic mindset, and also it made me spiral. It can absolutely do more harm than good, and in this case it definitely did that. Like I said, my hormones were already so suppressed, my metabolism was so suppressed, so coming out of that, it took me a good couple of years. I didn't even recognise I was in that spot. So unrealistic expectations can definitely hinder us. The next thing is the fear of food or gaining weight back. So typically when we enter a diet phase or wanting to lose fat, we're uncomfortable in our own skin. So we enter this, or we have these goals, we're going to lose fat or lose weight. With that, we then fear going back to that place. I was once 200 pounds, I get down to my goal of 180, and then we hang on to that for dear life, and we have such a big fear of gaining the weight back. And we also view food as the enemy. Food becomes the enemy and scale weight becomes the be-all end-all. Like I said, this is definitely something I've been in before, viewing food not as fuel, viewing food as if I eat, it's a bad thing. If that scale weight goes back or increases, it's a bad thing. if you're training right and you're fueling your body, use the scale weight as a tool. I've mentioned this before. And start viewing food as fuel. Viewing it as to fuel your workouts, and it's not the enemy. Another common mistake is people going from having their skill sets in place, so they're maybe tracking their food and they've got their set days, they do their workouts, and then when they reach that diet goal, so they get down to that 180 pounds, for example, they go back to just winging it and go back to living their lives. So they don't track anything, they just totally wing it. And they fall back into the behaviours that got them there in the first place, just going back to their old ways. This is something I'm seeing a lot with people that are on weight loss drugs or weight loss injections. They're taking these injections, it's suppressing their appetite, and when they come off the injections, there's no behavioural change in place. So they're regaining the weight back even, and sometimes even more. So it's something that's definitely coming to light a lot more as we're seeing GLP-1s on the rise. But even people that go through the behavioural change or go through this, view it as a phase of okay, I'm just going to cut calories and go on the treadmill for a couple of months, get down to a certain weight, and then just go back to the way they were eating before. And no exercise. And I can see how people rebound from this, because your body's under so much stress that it's going to rebound. That's why you have to have a plan in place where it's small changes here and there, but it's consistent over time. Just tweaking little things here and here, but being consistent with it and viewing it as a lifestyle change, not just I'm on a diet, I'm off a diet sort of thing. The last one, and this is probably my favourite one, I kind of just touched base on this, but people not realising that their body needs more fuel to maintain results. So if you go about fat loss the right way, and when I say right way, that's assessing where your starting point is and start strength training, tracking nutrition, hitting your protein goals, getting the basics, getting the fundamentals down. And if you lose the weight, and if you've built up some muscle mass, your maintenance level has probably shifted from what it was at the starting point. So let's just say your maintenance at the start was 2,000 calories and you managed to lose 10 pounds of fat whilst strength training and maintaining that muscle. When you're working your way back up to maintenance, your maintenance is going to be a higher starting point. So it's going to be above that 2,000 calories because you've got more muscle mass. The more muscle mass you hold, the higher metabolism is, the higher your maintenance is. So how do we successfully transition out of a diet? The first thing you should do is gradually increase your calories. So you should never reverse out of a diet by automatically going straight back to your maintenance. So we'll take this example again. If you diet down and your lowest point of calories, your maintenance is 2,000, your lowest point is say 1,700. You never just go straight back to that 2,000 calories. You've got to slowly increase it. And what this looks like is maybe 100 calories at a time, maybe 100 calories per week, maybe even just 50 calories, starting at 50 calories and seeing what your weight does, seeing how your physique is looking, and ensuring that you're not gaining a ton of fat in the process. It's inevitable that you will gain a little bit of fat, but you're wanting to minimize that. And to minimize that, you need to do slow increments. So doing that 100 calories, 50 calories, whatever it is. Typically, this will come from carbs and fats. Your protein should be staying high the majority of the time throughout your dieting phase. It should be high no matter what. And the only time I would recommend people to maybe reduce their protein intake is if they're having some sort of reaction, so any type of GI distress from the protein. You may just tone it back a little bit, but typically you want to keep protein nice and high. So when you're reverse dieting, you're slowly increasing carbs and fats. The next thing you want to focus on is keeping your training intensity high. Focus on performance goals instead of the scale. So I still would use the scale as a good guide, but focus more on what you're doing in the gym. So take your mind away from the number, away from your weight loss goals, and focus more on pushing yourself in the gym. So performance, lifting more, adding more volume, adding more sets, reps, etc. So just to recap, you want to slowly increase your nutrition and slowly increase your performance in the gym. The one things that you want to keep consistent is continuing a daily structure. So, for example, your meals shouldn't really be that much different. Just because you're not dieting anymore doesn't mean you can go and just eat a bunch of crap. It does give you that little bit more flexibility. However, I recommend that you just keep somewhat of a routine, so eating the same stuff you're eating before, just more portions of it. this allows you to, when you do enter a diet phase again, if you decide to do that, not much really changes. You just decrease the portion sizes, but keeping the protein kind of levels the same, maybe just decreasing the carbs a little bit. Takes a lot of decision fatigue out of it, and also keeps adhering to certain quote-unquote meal plans easier. And if you're going through a diet phase, you're learning a lot about your body. So you're probably learning what types of foods work well and what type of food don't. So keeping things relatively consistent just keeps your body in that nice level of, high energy. You know what works, you know what doesn't, and keeping performance nice and high. The next thing you want to keep consistent is your movement. And this is something I messed up on in my first muscle gaining phase, is I went from walking, around at least 10,000 steps a day. Usually it was closer to that 12, I would say between 12 and 15,000 steps a day. And I was doing this consistently for years. And all of a sudden I went into a muscle gaining phase and I just stopped focusing on my steps, and I was probably getting, between, I'd say 6,000 to 8,000 steps a day. And that was me not tracking it. That was not me going for walks. I just went about my day. I'm a personal trainer, so I was going about, working throughout the day and my workout in the afternoons, and that was it. No extra walking, nothing. The days I played golf, that was a little bit higher, but apart from that, I would say averaging around that 7,000 mark. And when I enter my next muscle gaining phase, this is definitely something I'll be focusing on a little bit more, is just keeping movement in. And when I say movement, I mean walking, low impact stuff. I don't mean adding in HIIT training or any intense cardio, but this is more for health reasons. Walking has so many benefits. Not only is it therapeutic, being out in nature, but it's also good for your joints. It's good for active recovery, getting your blood flowing. It's just such a good exercise that people should do every single day, regardless of your goals. Walking is an extremely powerful tool, and just having that habit in place where you go for, I don't want to say it's structured, but say if you walk the dog every single morning, keep that in place. Just because you're muscle gaining does not mean you should just sit on your arse and not do anything, and just take away all forms of movement apart from the training in the gym. This is definitely something that I did, and I noticed, one, my mental state. I enjoy walking, and especially first thing in the morning or after dinner, but I noticed a difference in my joints. I've never had sore knees in my life, and all of a sudden my knees were just killing me. This may, also be from the intense training. I've never trained as hard as I did, when I was going through my first muscle building phase, but so having sore knees may have been from that. However, I do think a lot of it as well was just from the inflammation and the lack of movement I was doing. The next thing, which is also extremely, extremely important, that I don't want people to sleep on, and excuse the pun, but that is sleep. Making sure that you are still prioritizing sleep, so that is 7 to 8 hours a night. If you are finding that in a muscle gaining phase your sleep is getting disrupted, then try prioritizing it even more. You may have to play around with meal timings. I definitely found this if I had higher carb meals later on in the day. So for dinner, my sleep was a little disrupted, so I tried to shift more carbs earlier in the day and around my training sessions, and have more lower carb as much as I could. It still wasn't low carb, but as low carb as I possibly could while hitting my macros, but avoiding that before I went to bed. The next thing that you should do, and like I said, if you've done a fat loss phase successfully, this should be relatively easy for you, but is still tracking your data. And that is your weekly assessments, which is your weight trends, your hunger signals, energy, performance, and libido. So when you are in a dieting phase, your weight is obviously trending down. When you're coming up to maintenance, expect it to trend a little bit up, but it should kind of level out depending on how quickly you do this and how you go about it. If you do it the right way, you should maybe gain 3 to 5 pounds possibly. Usually this happens pretty quickly when you're doing this because you're in a deprived state. So as soon as you add carbs into it, you start retaining more water. So expect the weight to go up, but just monitoring that weight trend, and also assessing your hunger. So when you're in a deprived state, your hunger signals, so that's your leptin and your ghrelin, they're totally out of whack. So even when you eat a meal, you may still feel hungry. And coming out of a diet, it can even be more ramped up. Your body's craving carbs and calories. So being able to control this and assessing your hunger, and you will notice week after week, your hunger signals do start to level out and you no longer crave those highly palatable foods. It is something that does take a bit of time, but I like to have some sort of way I can track this. So on a scale, I literally do it on a scale of 1 to 5, how hungry do I feel? Or how intense are my hunger signals? 5 being that all I can think about is food. And I've said this before, the hedonic treadmill that Dr. Mike Israetel talks about. If peanut butter is like crack to you, then you're at number 5. Your hunger signals are through the roof. If it's kind of like I can take it or leave it, you're at 1. When you're peak muscle gaining phase, food should be pretty like 1 or 2. If you're in a dieting phase, you may be shooting at 3 or 5, depending on how intense your dieting is. If you're in contest prep, then it probably is more of a 5. But putting some sort of metric behind it where you can track it is really good. Same with your energy. So on a scale of 1 to 5, assess your energy. And performance that can be tracked a bit more intently. You should be having some sort of structure behind your workouts and definitely track what you're lifting in the gym and your volume. This will help when you're coming into a maintenance phase, how much you're progressing. And just like your hunger and your energy, libido, I would track this on a scale. So 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. Libido, for those that don't know, is your hormones. So it's your sex drive. You will notice that when you're in a deprived state, your sex drive is probably very, very suppressed. So, like I said, I recommend having some sort of metric behind that rather than just being like, oh yeah, this week I felt really hungry and my energy was crap but my sex drive was nothing. And then the week after, just kind of going about your day, not assessing it. It takes all the guesswork out of it and it maximizes your chances of making good decisions moving forward. This is where a coach can definitely help, having someone that has all this data and can help you assess it and make right decisions to keep you progressing rather than just taking a shot in the dark. I like the phrase of what gets measured gets managed. So if you're not measuring, weight trends, what you're eating, your performance in the gym or sleep, whatever, just everything, it's not going to get managed. So make sure that you are tracking what needs to get managed. And when it comes to physique goals, the points I've just made, these are all very, very important metrics that you should be managing. A few mindset shifts I want people to consider that will set them up for a successful weight loss journey in terms of like losing weight and keeping it off is making sure that you're thinking long term. So you've probably heard that it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. And this applies to every single person, even those in contest prep, as in bodybuilders. You want to make this a lifestyle. It's not just like I'm on, I'm off. And also realizing that each phase has its purpose. So a diet or a fat loss phase, this got you the results. So if you're that 200-pound person, you want to lose the 20 pounds and you do that, dieting got you the results, but maintenance is what keeps them. So every phase has its purpose. It's also not about being shredded 24/7. It's about sustaining this long term. So how can you live a life where you're not totally food focused, totally physique focused, and you can just enjoy food, enjoy being high energy, enjoying your workouts, enjoying the journey, enjoying the progress, whilst just, like I said, going about your life. There are points depending on your goals. If you're a competitor, then absolutely there's going to be points in your life where you have to be totally diligent and embrace the journey and embrace the challenges of being food focused and bringing your Tupperware to dinners and all this stuff. But the majority of your life should be spent in a homeostasis state. The next mindset shift I want you to think about, and this is something that I'm trying to do, is celebrate consistency and balance, not restriction. I've been in a place before where I almost praised myself for being able to say no. And there's a difference, I've talked about this before, but there's a difference between discipline and restriction. And when you praise yourself for restriction, that's a very, very slippery slope to go down. So you want to be able to celebrate the consistency and balance in your life rather than praising yourself for the restriction. The consistency and balance is what's going to get you results. It's weird. It's almost like once you let go of the control, you almost feel like you feel the stress leaving your body and you're able to make way better decisions and also keep it long term. The more you control something and it feels like the resistance is there, but you just try and hold on for dear life, you're going to bounce back. You're going to rebound. So make sure that if it feels relatively easy and you're seeing progress, that's how it should be. Like I said, unless you're in contest prep, the average person just wanting to gain muscle and lose fat shouldn't be that different. It should feel relatively easy to stick to. The last thing, and this is definitely one of my favourite ones, is that you want to feel your best and not be attached to a goal weight. This is a little morbid, but I always say to people, like, when you die, no one's going to give a crap about what you weigh, like your scale weight. They're going to give a crap about the person that you were, what you did, how you influenced people, the energy you brought to their lives, not about what you weighed on the scale. So don't get attached to that scale weight. Think about the bigger picture and assess your values, assess what you want to get out of this, how you want to change, why you want to change, and use the scale as a tool in your toolbox. It is not the end goal. So if you're someone that has gone through a fat loss phase and you're now up to maintenance, you're feeling good, how do you know if you're ready for another goal phase? The first thing is that you've stabilized your hunger and your hormones and you're back to that homeostasis state. So everything is stabilized, your hunger is normalized, your strength is improving, such as your performance in the gym, your energy is back to normal. And one of the biggest things is that you've got no food guilt. You've got a good relationship with food. That's a very, very important one. I do not recommend people going into a fat loss phase if they have a poor relationship with food or if they have signs of body dysmorphia. You want to make sure you're in a good mental state to go into another phase. The next thing is emphasizing that true progress cycles through different phases. What I mean by this is that if you really want to progress, you've got to understand that each phase has their purpose. So when you enter a cut, the purpose is to lose body fat but maintain that muscle. When you're in a maintenance phase, you're bringing your body back to homeostasis. You're just living your life, energy is good, you're feeling fine. Building phase, that's when you're trying to build muscle. So accept that with a building phase, the scale weight is going to go up, but focusing more on performance. And then repeating whatever phase. But understanding that each phase has a purpose and accepting and understanding the differences between each phases and what comes along with them. Okay, so before we wrap up this episode, a few things I want you to consider. How lean you are will depend on how long it takes to get back to homeostasis. So I always like to think in extremes. So if we consider someone who's in contest prep and who's just stepped up on stage, they're extremely, extremely lean. They've got very low body fat percentage. This will take them slightly longer to get back to maintenance. And it's a very strenuous process. Something I've not been through yet, but I will be. So I'll definitely keep you guys up to date on how I'm feeling through that. That will probably be next year. If anyone is interested, by the way, on me doing an episode on my own journey, please comment below. I've had a lot of requests for it. I'm not sure. I'd try and avoid talking about myself too much on this. It's more for your guys' benefit. But if you want me to do an episode on my own journey, I'm more than happy to do that. But like I said, it depends on how lean you are. If you've been dieting for a long period of time, so say 6 months or so, and you've got a big weight loss goal, then I do suggest going through different phases. But it definitely depends on the person. The average person, it should take them slightly less to get back to maintenance. But like I said, it's highly dependent on the person. The next thing I want you to consider is strength training. And just add more if it feels right. If you're coming out of a diet phase, you may be really, really fatigued, and adding strength straight away or adding volume straight away may not be the right decision. You may want to wait a couple of weeks and just focus on increasing food and getting your sleep regulated, your hormones regulated, and then focusing on performance. So it doesn't have to be straight away. Like one day you're in a deficit, you reach that goal weight, the next day all of a sudden you're in the gym and you're trying to lift, increasing by 10-20%. So listen to your body, and if it feels right, add weight. If it doesn't, give yourself a couple of weeks or so till your body feels physically ready to add the volume. The next thing is reducing cardio. So like I said, if you're in a deprived state for a long time, your body's under a lot of stress, you may want to tone back on the cardio a little bit. So increasing calories a little bit, but reducing the cardio as well. That could be a good tool if you're not ready to push yourself in the gym. just reducing that cardio can get your body back and reduce that amount of stress and stimulus on the body. The next thing, and I've mentioned this again, expect the scale weight to increase. But the biggest thing I want you to focus on is shifting, rather than focusing so much on the scale, is shifting away from that and focusing more on performance. So expect the scale weight to increase. It may have an initial spike, but it will regulate, down the line depending on what your approach is. Like I said, if you increase carbs, even by that little bit, wherever carbs go, water flows, so you're going to store more water weight. I like to give people a range. If they're just wanting to live within maintenance, they've gone through the fat loss phase, and they're just looking to maintain the rest of their life, they're not competitors, then I like to give them a range of, whether that's 180 to 185 pounds. And that's their accountability. So as soon as it starts creeping towards that 185, you can kind of tone things back a little bit. But giving you that range, weight fluctuates so much, but giving you that range just helps you keep within your goals and maintaining that fat loss. So that is all I have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. As always, if you are interested in coaching, then please head to the Summit Coaching Instagram page, link below, send me a message, and you will also find my application form in there, so you can fill that out and I can get you started on your fitness goals. With coaching, you'll be working directly with myself. You'll get customized workouts, customized nutrition plans. Everything is totally customized to my clients, and you'll also have 24/7 support, so you can reach out to me at any point in time, followed by formal weekly check-ins. So my coaching is highly, highly customized to suit each client's needs. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, then please give it a 5-star review, share it with your friends, so on social media. The more people we can bring into the circle, the more people we are benefiting. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Let me know your thoughts, and I will see you guys next week.